Hi everyone, so I have wanted to talk about some palettes that I am glad I have not purchased for a long time. I've seen a few people do this concept or a similar concept before where they just talk about things that they might have considered buying or things that they might have purchased in an alternate universe and then didn't and are very glad that they didn't buy. So I thought this would be fun to talk about. I know that people do enjoy watching these sort of more negative videos because it's fun. It really is fun hearing about the things people don't like, almost more than the things they do like sometimes. It's kind of strange. But anyway, I just want to put a little disclaimer at the very beginning that these are just my opinions, and if you bought any of these things, I am not talking negatively about you. I'm just talking about my own opinions and my own experiences. And it doesn't mean that I'm right. I just have so many feelings. I did also explain this in my unpopular opinions video that I just did, and some people just seem to have not seen the word unpopular or not heard that it was my opinions and not facts. So anyway, I just want to say that at the very beginning, if these sort of videos bother you, if you don't like the negative things, now's your time to leave, because that's what we're going to be getting into here. Some just unfiltered opinions. And I will try to elaborate a little bit. Some people wanted more clarification on why I don't like things, but I'm not going too much into the drama. A lot of this stuff you probably already know. If you're in the beauty community at all, you've probably heard people allude to these things at the very least. Also, Google is your friend. There's a lot of information out there if you want to do your research. All right, so with that said, remember, this is all in good fun. And the very first palette I'm glad I did not purchase is the controversy palette, the Jeffree Star Shane Dawson collaboration, which was very clearly orchestrated, and the whole Shane documentary thing is definitely just promotion for the palette. People went nuts about it. People are truly stans for these two, which I don't understand, as I mentioned in my unpopular opinions video. I'm not going to get into the drama details about Jeffree and Shane, but it's all out there. And I would have considered purchasing this palette if only to make a YouTube video. And I hate that that is something that even crossed my mind for a second, because as much as I hate to admit it, those two people get views. If I was to put that palette in my thumbnail, in my title, if I had it to do a comparison, to do a review, I would have gotten views on that video. But it's definitely not worth it to me to actually pay money for that. No. Also, the palette's really ugly. I'm sorry, I like weird color schemes. I like to see some different stuff, but I just think this is an ugly palette, and I personally have not watched any videos of anybody using this palette. I have no idea how the shadows perform. It doesn't really matter. The people behind the product is the reason why I ultimately would not want to purchase it. The only thing I did watch relating to that palette was it Beauty News, the ones that destroy things, but they had actually been sent the palette specifically to destroy. There's some weird relationship with some channels and those creators, like drama channels and more controversial channels. Some weird stuff going on. But anyway, we're not talking conspiracy theories, even though this is the controversy palette. I think that could be fun. I thoroughly enjoy makeup conspiracies, and I could go on and on forever, but I feel like I would just look like that meme. Probably already look like that. Anyway, I'm really glad I didn't buy that palette for those reasons, and it seems like people aren't really talking about it much anymore anyway. Once the Shane documentary stopped, people seem to lose interest a little bit, and they're already on to the new thing. That's just the way this community works. There's new products all the time. People are constantly moving on to the next thing. The second palette I'm glad I did not purchase is the Muerte palette. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I did YouTube how to pronounce it and did practice it, but I still don't think I can pronounce any Spanish words very well. So anyway, I loved this palette when I first saw it. I thought the color scheme was beautiful. I think Melt has come up with some really interesting concept with their eyeshadows, some stuff that has been very inspiring. They're doing things that I feel like a lot of the vocal, like online beauty community people have been really pushing for unique things, pushing for cooler tones, pushing for greens. And the Muerte palette, so stunning. Now, I kept thinking about it. I kept trying to find an excuse. I was like, how can I justify this? I definitely don't need another eyeshadow palette. I have way too many, but it's beautiful. And then I ended up duping the vibe. So I was actually considering doing a video on this. Let me know if you'd be interested in this kind of concept. I saw, I believe it was Hannah Louise Poston do this, where she would dupe the essential vibe of a palette. So not necessarily identical dupes for each shadow, but just kind of getting the spirit of it. So I have my own sort of Muerte dupe, not identical, but similar vibes, just using single shadows that I already owned. I used this twice. As beautiful as it is, it's not a color scheme that I actually put on my eyes a lot. Maybe if I really sat down to like play with it, if I really wanted to do some pretty colorful things, which I still might do because this is pretty, and if I was stuck for ideas, just looking at this would really inspire me to do like, you know, some blown out smoky green thing with like the mint and even a little touch of the red. A few of the looks I saw from pictures people posted on Instagram where they had just like a sort of red smoky eye with like the hint of the mint or something underneath, like in the middle of the lower lash line or in the inner corner, just little playful hints like that. Very inspiring, but I didn't need the palette, obviously, to be inspired by it and to even have a very similar look because I already had similar shadows. I just had to dig up my singles and arrange it differently. And it was enough to prove to me that I didn't actually need this palette. I'm not saying that the palette isn't good. I don't really have much experience with melt eyeshadows. I have a melt stack, but I have heard really good things. A lot of people who have melt shadows talk pretty positively about it, so it sounds good. It's just, I know I wouldn't have ended up using it if I did buy it, just because if I didn't use the single shadows I have in the same color story, why would I use this other palette? So I'm glad I did not purchase that. The third palette I'm glad I did not buy is actually a couple palettes, and I'm kind of calling out a certain brand here, and this is just very much personal preference, but the Norvina palettes, all of them, even any of the new ABH releases, the Jackie Aina palette, the Alyssa Edwards palette, which I wanted because I super love Alyssa Edwards, and was it like even from before Soft Glam, just stuff like that. I'm really glad I did not purchase because I don't like the Anastasia eyeshadow formula. I know a lot of people love the Anastasia formula. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying I don't personally like working with it, specifically the mattes. I'd say the Anastasia mattes are my least favorite matte formula that I've ever personally tried. Metallics are beautiful. Like, I'd buy a palette of just metallic ABH shadows because they are wonderful. But the mattes I just deeply do not like working with. And I have issues getting them to apply well. I get a lot of fallout. They don't tend to blend well together. I just struggle with them and I don't enjoy it. So I'm glad I didn't purchase any of those ABH Norvina palettes. As beautiful as they are, just looking at them and the people like supporting somebody like Alyssa Edwards, like Jackie Aina, I have nothing against that. I think it's the collabs ABH does tend to be really well done, and they tend to have really good campaigns. They have really good assortment of shadows. Seems like a lot of thought goes into everything. It's just the formula. Just from my own experience and my own preferences, I know I would not end up getting the use out of those palettes that I would get from a different brand. The fourth palette is the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette. So Naked Honey and Naked Cherry, I was pretty excited about both of them. Some of you may remember that I was the one to sort of spoil the release of the Naked Cherry palette, and I had talked about the Naked Honey palette way in advance when I had dug into some of the Urban Decay trademarks, and I found the Naked Honey trademark, and I was fantasizing about this beautiful yellow palette. And while the Naked Honey palette looks beautiful, it's nothing that I don't already have. There's a lot of simple gold shades. It's a very neutral palette. Doesn't really stray much from the Urban Decay world. Definitely fits the Naked vibe. I think it looks really nice, but it wasn't enough to make me go, wow, I have to break my no buy. I need this palette in my life, because I have so many beautiful gold shadows that I already love. And like, I have a single of Half Baked from Urban Decay, which is my favorite gold eyeshadow. So why would I need this particular palette if it wasn't going to bring anything new to me? That's really been eye-opening with my no buy, is that in another life, I would have just bought that without even thinking about it, because I was at one point just buying every new release Urban Decay came out with, because I loved the eyeshadows and I just thought I needed everything. I was like, I'm an Urban Decay fangirl, I have to have this stuff. And I don't. There's never been a time where I've worn gold shadow and someone's asked me what it was and been disappointed that it wasn't the Naked Honey palette, you know? Like, someone's like, oh, you're not a good Urban Decay fan because you don't have everything they've released. Because I don't need everything they've released. In another life, I probably would have purchased the Lolita palette from Kat Von D. Obviously, with the stuff that came out with Kat Von D, I took my stance against her and the anti-vax thing, and I stopped purchasing from Kat Von D. It was that simple. And I haven't really paid attention to a lot of the things that she has come out with. I did see a few pictures of this palette and I was like, that is pretty. At one point I saw a picture of the palette that was sort of far away, so you couldn't identify the palette or the eyeshadow names. You couldn't see what brand it was, and I was like, that looks like a beautiful palette. Wow. I think that would fit in with my sort of collection and maybe like fill a gap. And then I saw it was Kat Von D and I was like, no, pretty but no. So I feel like, you know, if that palette had come out 2 years ago, I would have purchased it, but not now because I don't support Kat Von D. But it's definitely something that I strongly would have considered purchasing based on the palette alone. That is a challenge sometimes. You might see something that looks beautiful, something that you think might really work well for you, but it just doesn't line up with your beliefs. The Colourpop Smoke Show palette. So this palette, I was shocked when I first saw it. I really did not think Colourpop would do anything like it. They kept saying like, you guys asked for this, and I don't know if that's actually true. Maybe they actually heard the small group of us that have been like, cool tones, cool tones, cool tones. They're like chanting that every time somebody would post something. Here's another warm tone, and there's like 6 of us in a corner with signs being like, cool tones, cool tones, cool tones. We always want our gray shadows. I think this palette is beautiful. I hope more brands come out with cool tone palettes like this. I love the shimmers in this palette so much, so much. I love looking at them, but I know there's so many of the other shadows that would go untouched that I just wouldn't end up using. I want the shimmers more than anything else. That's one thing I've realized by looking through the stuff that I already have. What's really missing is cool tone metallics, cool tone shimmers, glittery, anything interesting that's in a cooler tone, because a lot of my duochrome shadows, a lot of my reflective things are very, very warm. And that's something that I do like just because of my eye color. I like to wear a lot of like warm, orangey, rusty colors because it makes my eyes look more blue. But I love cool tones, and I feel like because I have cooler tone skin, cool tone shadows look pretty good as well. So I make it work. I am one of those people who's like, I will wear warm and I will wear cool. I don't care what anybody says. And the Smoke Show palette looks fantastic, but just truly I wouldn't end up using enough of the shadows to make it worth it. And that's one thing I have been looking at when I do consider purchasing palettes, which hasn't been very often. I purchased 2 palettes over this last year, one mini one and one large one. But I do look at the palette as a whole and look like, how many of these shadows would I actually use? And I want to get as close to 100% as possible. The Tati Beauty palette. So I think it's really interesting that she finally came out with an eyeshadow palette. I like the look of it, the color scheme, very pretty neutral palette. I don't need any more warm neutrals. I don't need any more neutral palettes, period, really. I really don't need anything else except for like that handful of cool tone shimmers, maybe. But the Tati palette, while it looks nice, I think it looked like a very nice beginner palette. It definitely makes sense as the first sort of makeup launch from her brand. I'm also kind of questionable about Tati. I used to really love her channel so much. Then there was the incident with Emily Noel. her palette, and then was it Kiki channel, I think, when she did like her emergency review. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know where my phone is to like look this up right now, but anyway, I remember that Tati then did a whole video basically attacking the person who did the emergency review without actually mentioning her name, and then people were like coming after her, and I just didn't like the way that was handled. Like, people respond to other YouTube videos, and Tati has such a large following. I didn't like that. Also, I thought it was kind of weird that she chose to call out James Charles only after he had the Sugar Bear hair sponsorship. So it was kind of like he was betraying her and her vitamins because he had this sponsorship from Sugar Bear hair or whatever it was. Anyway, I just thought that was weird. It was like, yay, Tati, for calling him out on his crap, but why did it take you so long to do it? So I've been a little like on the fence about Tati, and I will occasionally watch some of her videos, but I'm just not very interested in anything that she has coming out. My shirt keeps falling off. The Viseart Grande Pro palette, so beautiful to look at. I don't even want to know the price of this. Honestly, I just kept seeing pictures of this. I saw a few people that I follow on Instagram using this palette, and I was like, oh my god, it looks so good. I don't really do a lot of colorful things anymore. I have the Viseart Editorial Brights palette, which is stunning, and I love those bright eyeshadows, but a large palette like that one wouldn't be worth it for me because I barely touch colorful things, you know, like a hint here or there. Every now and then I do like green or purple, it seems these days. I just wouldn't use it. I just wouldn't get the use out of it. I feel like Viseart is just beautiful for makeup artists, and I've seen a few of my makeup artist friends on Instagram using this palette and doing looks on other people, and it looks amazing, and I think they're absolutely getting their money's worth out of the palette because they're using it in so many different ways that I just wouldn't. The Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. So I really like the concept of a lot of the Huda Beauty palettes. I have the Desert Dusk palette, which aged terribly. Probably the worst out of any eyeshadow palette that I've ever owned. Yes, I know expiration dates are a thing, but I've never had an issue with palettes before being able to last beyond a 12-month period, and the Desert Dusk palette was like good one day and bad the next. And I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say like bad, just like the quality decreased, and that I just can't get the same kind of payoff as I did before. I'm definitely having to really go in with the Fix Plus and the metallic shades to get them to apply nicely and be very pigmented, and the mattes are pretty much useless. I'm basically keeping it at this point because of the metallic shades, and like there's a couple in there that I really enjoy using, so I will make it work for now, but I definitely was sort of disappointed in that. Plus, I've had experience, at least with the one little mini, the Emerald Little Green Huda palette, which was awful. I know a lot of people love it, and a lot of people don't have issues with the formula, but I have had significant issues with the formula. The concept itself is pretty cool, and I think that she does a pretty good job coming up with the color story and the arrangement of her palettes. I always think that they're very beautiful to look at, but just with my experience when I'm using those shadows, it doesn't make me want to buy a fairly expensive eyeshadow palette. And the last palette I'm glad I did not purchase is the Peachy Queen Friends palette. So just in general, a lot of indie brands come out with rainbow palettes and or vaguely pop culture themed palettes. I am a sucker for pop culture themed things, especially things that I'm even remotely interested in. I haven't watched a lot of Friends recently. I was a big fan of Friends back in the day when it was actually on air. I remember like watching the finale when it actually aired because I'm that old. And I have the first couple of seasons of Friends box sets on VHS. It's deep, I can't let it go. But I would have considered purchasing something like that, just even though it had nothing to do with Friends. Like the color scheme, nothing to do with Friends. No connection whatsoever. But just having things with those references get me. I'm a sucker for references, and I want to own that thing. That would make me happy to look at it. But I wouldn't use it, and I probably wouldn't ultimately be that inspired by it. If it was more related to the show, perhaps, but I don't need an eyeshadow palette related to a show. I'd rather have like a t-shirt or something like that, like that I could wear to show my strange pop culture love. I was gonna say I'm odd that way, but I really think that a lot of people probably feel the same way. And also, is this a copyright issue? Is this some sort of infringement? Do they have the rights to do this? It seems kind of questionable and something that I have to wonder about, because it makes me hesitate supporting it if they aren't doing everything above board. And I know it's very expensive for licensing and all that, but then just come up with your own original ideas. Don't try and create something based off of something else if it might cross a line. I love official collaborations. Like, don't even get me started on the Pat McGrath Star Wars collection. Don't get me started. But stuff like that that's actually legitimate, oh my god, it can be done so well. And I feel like if licensing wasn't that expensive, some more of these indie brands could really put out fantastic collaborations based on these pop culture things, like TV shows, like Friends, and it could be wonderful. And I just feel like not all of them are executed properly, and sometimes it feels just like an easy way to get money. Easy, assuming they don't get sued, just because people will be like me and be like, I want this thing that's related to this subject topic that I like. Anyway, so that is everything for the 10 palettes I'm glad I did not purchase. I'm sure there's a lot of overlapping themes here. Let me know if there are any palettes you are glad you did not purchase, and if you purchased any of these things, let me know what you think about them. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you on the fence? What do you like or what don't you like? I'd be very curious to hear your opinions on these things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Bye for now.